Heidi ho, how's it go? Welcome to Whole Lotta Rich. I'm Rich Latta. Today we have a very special guest, Tom Williams of William Schmilliams. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you
It's
very much for having me.
yeah. Um it's been a minute since I saw you face to face in a video chat. Um, Way back when we did a special on the Disintegration album by The Cure, and I remember I actually I think said some misinformation. I heard an urban legend about Robert Smith's uncle scaring him and then crawling through a window at night to scare the pants off of him as the inspiration for Lullaby. I think that's bullshit. That's just an urban legend. So I felt the need to clear the air about that.
I'd completely forgotten about that story.
So what is new in your world? I know that you are a big concert goer and you're a musician in your own right. So what have you been up to?
Yeah, lots and lots of concerts. A couple of years ago, I got the bug, and I just anytime I get any disposable income, it's not like put it in your savings for a car at some point or a home. At the moment, it's very much like just go to as many concerts as you can. I'm also looking to work in the events industry, so I'm doing a lot of volunteer work at festivals and stuff as well.
Uh,
So that's fun. So I get to see some music for free as well as get some good stuff for my
that's awesome. Now
resume.
you're in Wales, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
I'll be moving to Manchester, England, in September. So yeah,
Okay. Cool. Yeah.
um,
I am just amazed that I can talk to you. You're all the way across the ocean, and it's like you're sitting in my living room. It just modern technology, something
yeah,
else.
yeah, yeah. No, it's pretty cool. And then yeah, in terms of my own music, released 4 solo albums, very like home recording, get it to sound as good as I can here on my own. But now working on some stuff with a band, so that's cool. Getting a few gigs going, and hopefully we'll release some stuff sometime this year. So
All right. That's fantastic news. I really like your singing voice. I love your work. So, looking forward to what comes next.
thank you very much.
All right, so let's just dive into this. We are rating and ranking the 7 albums of Saint Vincent, aka Annie Clark, singer, songwriter, multi-instrumentalist, producer, art rock wizard extraordinaire. Raised in Dallas, my hometown. She was a member of the Polyphonic Spree early on before eventually releasing her debut album, Marry Me, in 2007. She gets a lot of praise for her guitar work, and she has won a bunch of Grammy awards and other awards. So, what is your background with St. Vincent, Tom?
Um, Interesting. A friend of mine introduced me to her music a few years ago, and yeah, it was pretty much love at first listen. I can't really remember what the first song I would be introduced to was. Probably something from Strange Mercy or Mass Seduction, maybe. And that was around 2019. And then obviously she's released 2 albums since then. Very varied, eclectic discography, and I think one of the greatest artists of the 21st century.
All right, very cool. Um, As for myself, I can't remember if Actor or Strange Mercy was my first listen. My memory around this general time period is fuzzy, but I can say for sure that I heard her first 3 albums early on, and I've loosely followed her since then. I guess I qualify as a casual fan. Um, So you are the guest, Tom. Why don't you start us off with your bottom placement, your number seven?
Well, you're gonna have to trust me that it gives me no great joy in doing this, but my number seven is Daddy's Home, which is a sixth album from 2021. We're doing out of 5 star ratings, right?
That's what I do. You can do what
Yeah,
you want, but I do. I
that's
use
fine.
5 stars. I also use the notorious quarter stars.
That's cool. So I would say, 2.5 out of 5 for this one. And as I just explained, um, this has got to be one of the most disappointing albums of all time for me because coming into it, I was a mega fan and everything she'd released I thought was brilliant. And then the singles came out for this and I really didn't like them. I thought, well, I gotta give them some time, listen to them again, wait for the whole album to come out, and it just was not for me. Um, Yeah, I don't know. It does have its fans. I just think it's a bit like embarrassing. I don't know how else to put it. Like, not as in embarrassingly bad, but it's almost this like secondhand cringe of her trying to take on this style and not sounding totally comfortable. It sounds like she's really putting something on, whereas she usually can so organically go from one style to the other. I don't think her vocal style really fits the sort of 70s funk, R&B influence sound she's going for here. And the production, which is usually a big highlight on all her albums, I think is really weak here. Um, it's really flat. It's not like dynamic enough. It is like really everything just sort of merges into one big blob of sound. Whereas your best sort of 70s funk and soul is the opposite of that. You can hear everything clear as a bell. Um, and it's not that I don't like pastiche. I'm a big fan of the Lemon Twigs. So like that's not the reason. I just think she went for a big swing here and didn't quite pull it off. But, even an album as disappointing as this that I really don't like, it has a track in Somebody Like Me that I do really like. And that was one track that I did take away from it that I really enjoyed. But stuff like Down and Pay Your Way in Pain is just, they're some of the worst tracks she ever released, I think. So, yeah, some people aren't going to like that, but I know it's sort of a very divisive one. Some people love it, some people don't as much. And I think it's comfortably seventh place for me.
Okay, and again, that was a 2.5. Okay. Um, yeah, Daddy's Home is my bottom placement. It's her sixth album, came out in 2021. I'm a little higher on it than you are, though. So Annie took inspiration from the past from this album, specifically the early 70s, artists like Stevie Wonder. I do hear that influence, but I wouldn't go so far as to call Daddy's Home a retro record. It is Annie's most laid-back record overall. The title refers to her father getting out of prison after serving time for stock fraud. Opening track Pay Your Way in Pain doesn't particularly sound retro to me, save for the piano intro, although I guess there is sort of a funky 70s vibe in there. Actually, it's got the Sweet Dreams Are Made of These synth sound. A very good song, as is the following track, Down and Out Downtown, which actually does have a retro sound. Next, we get the title track, which is kind of laid back and slinky, while the next two tracks pay tribute to Pink Floyd in the lyrics. Live in the Dream is dreamy and slow, with music recalling the Pink Floyd song Us and Them in the chords. The lyrics recall Comfortably Numb, and the guitar solo reminds me of Pink Floyd's David Gilmour. These songs are good, but merely good. Same with the woozy The Laughing Man. Several of these songs have exceptional background vocals, and Annie plays the sitar on several tracks, creating a nice, subtle retro touch. Somebody Like Me has some nice pedal steel and finger picking on guitar. My least favorite track on the album, and in fact, my least favorite Vincent song, is My Baby Wants a Baby, an interpolation of Sheena Easton's Morning Train, a song I've never been crazy about to begin with. It's not bad though, it's okay. The rest of the album is very good, with Down being the only song here I consider excellent, a tasty revenge fantasy that doesn't sound retro to me, thanks especially to the electronics, but it does have some retro elements, the guitars, the sitar, great lyrics. Go get your own shit. Get off my tit. Go face your demons. Check into treatment. Go flee the country. Go blame your daddy. Just get far away from me. Overall, I like the album, but to put it bluntly, this is Annie's weakest set of songs to date. It lacks the high highs, and several of these songs are merely good, so I'm rating this 3.75 stars.
Wow, you're starting high. Nice. Love to see it. My number six is the album that followed Daddy's Home, All Born Screaming. Um, but we're way up at a 3.5 out of 5 for this one. I do like this album. Um, Released in 2024. I think it's a sort of return to form. It's sort of going back to that sort of Strange Mercy self-titled sound, that sort of more industrial noise pop influence. The Nine Inch Nails influence is very apparent here more so than ever. I think she's always been influenced by Trent Reznor's music, but it's really, really clear on this album. I think it might be the best produced album in her entire discography. The production I would describe as like sharp and gnarly. Um, I think the problem here is the songs. Not that it's a problem; they're mostly good songs. But there's not those like capital B bangers that you get on a lot of her other albums. The one exception being Broken Man, which I think is a really great track. And I actually found myself liking this more than I did coming back to it now than when it came out. So that's always good when you come back to a discography and albums are better than you remember. Big Time Nothing has this really cool sort of funky guitar breakout that comes in the chorus, I think. And there's a lot of like cool touches like that that just keep the songs nice and dynamic. I think it's better as a straight through listen rather than an album where I take away any major highlight tracks. Um, yeah, it's another a great album cover as well. It's an album where the album cover sort of describes the sound pretty well visually. Um, and I think it's an important album for her to come back from Daddy's Home and sort of say like, because I think if that would have been another sound again, it would have been a bit like, oh, okay, she's just kind of running the gamut of like pastiches, but she's come back to something that feels quintessentially St. Vincent, which I did enjoy, and it makes me hopeful for her next album. So the only reason it's so low is because she set the bar so high. Number six is All Born Screaming, 3.5 out of 5.
All right, well done, Tom. My number six is the debut, Marry Me. It's from 2007. This is an impressive debut. Very arty, melodically pleasing, lots of Baroque pop elements, strings, woodwinds, layered arrangements. All the elements that make Annie a great artist are already evident. This establishes Annie as a character-driven songwriter and a sophisticated musician. The first two tracks are excellent. Opener Now Now is quirky art rock. Love the plucked guitar strings intro and the cool bass. There's also a wild guitar freakout at the end. Jesus Saves I Spend is very catchy, and I love how she uses the human voice as a musical instrument here. Her lips are red, has an insistent beat, and gets pretty weird. Weird is good. Lots of tasty little details. The title track sounds like a gushing proposal, but it's deceptive. Judging from the lyrics, the character singing doesn't sound like she would make a very good partner, unless you're into open marriages. There are no straightforward love songs on Marry Me. The album feels sweet and romantic on the surface, but rings hollow underneath. I love the piano flourishes on All My Stars Aligned, and Mike Garson of David Bowie fame contributes a short but lovely piece on the piano, and it slips right into the album nicely. Landmines sounds like the aftermath of a breakup, but the song itself is very dreamy. So, this is a very strong album. Everything here is at least really good. Some of it is great, and the rest hover around 4 stars, very good. So, I am actually rating this 4 stars, a very good album.
That is my number five. Marry Me. Um, and brace yourself, Rich. 3.75 out of 5. Um, and I decided to do this before somebody else did it on one of your other videos. So I'm not just trend chasing. And it's really funny you should mention that with Mike Garson because I'd written down that All My Stars Aligned was very Aladdin Sane-esque, and I had no idea that he played on this album. So that's really cool. Very distinct style. So I thought it was somebody doing an homage, but it was just him playing. So um, yeah, I mean, Annie's career is so consistently good. Um, it's quite hard to differentiate these albums. I think the one thing that drags Marry Me down is an track inconsistency, where I think the highs on this are pretty clear, it's pretty much the same ones that you have. Now is such a glorious opener for a discography, like so good. Pretty much is like a thesis statement of her style. The title track has always been my favorite. I think it's one of the catchiest songs she's ever written. That melody is always in my head, and I find myself singing it all the time and have done for years. I love her vocal performance on that as well. It's like she can't quite reach the notes, but she does it in a sort of charming way with these little squeaks and cracks. And that's the great thing is that I think she has quite a, I don't want to say flawed vocal range, but like a limited vocal range that she really stretches. And there are times where you can hear that she's really pushing her vocals and she maybe couldn't quite get there, but it's got this sort of endearing quality to it. She's got a great voice, but she likes really pushing herself, which I enjoy. And then, of course, All My Stars Aligned is a real gem track that I'd kind of forgotten about. I was coming back to Now and the title track a lot, but that was really dreamy and beautiful with the piano. And that's kind of how I describe this album. I do think some of it is a bit too pedestrian. Maybe that's why I can't quite get to 4 stars. But I do agree with what you say about it being a lot of it being more than what's on the surface, and that you hear a song the first time, or maybe the second or third time, one way, and then you really dive into the lyrics and you get a different experience out of it. So for that reason, I don't think it's quite among the upper echelon of her work, but it's pretty much a must listen if you're a fan of hers. And it has some of her best songs, even if it is a bit inconsistent.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, great review. My number five is her fifth studio album, Mass Seduction from 2017. This is an interesting, multifaceted album. It doesn't really get excellent until the second half, starting with New York, a great song with piano and strings and gorgeous double-tracked vocals. The first part of the album is in electro pop land, perhaps more aggressively than ever before, sporting some tasty electronic beats. Pills is definitely off the beaten path, and it's true that pills are a big part of the human experience, completely normalized. Sugar Boy makes use of a sequencer. It's a good song, but not really up to St. Vincent's high standards. I dig the weird ending, though. I really love the sound of Los Angeles a lot. but sadly, the chorus just doesn't do it for me. How can anybody have you? How can anybody have you and lose you? How can anybody have you and lose you and not lose their mind too? I don't know. It's just not catchy to me. It's a shame because the rest of the song is great and it's got a fierce bridge. Happy Birthday, Johnny is the third song in a trilogy of Johnny songs, beginning with Marry Me from the debut and Prince Johnny from St. Vincent. It's very, very good, a minimal song with piano and not much else. The guitar that opens Savior reminds me of Marvin Gaye's Let's Get It On. A good song, but another one with a chorus that doesn't do much for me. Fear the Future is damn good electro rock, though. It's got some wild sounds and chugs along like a runaway locomotive. Then we get to the gold songs. Young Lover is about a lover with a serious drug problem. It's got a steady four to the floor bass drum beat and gets really intense at the end when this person ODs. Slow Disco has gorgeous strings, a strange song about the joys of leaving, or getting the fuck out of there, as the case may be. Annie alters the pitch of her voice at the end to a lower register, which adds an eerie theatrical touch. And then the last track, Smoking Section, is excellent. A piano, some crying pedal steel, and then a big beat comes in. I love the bizarre 2 second freak out at the beginning of the third verse. It's a pretty depressing song, but then it ends with hope as Annie cries out that it's not the end. Another very strong St. Vincent album, 4 stars.
I have a lot of thoughts about that review, which we'll get to in due course. My number four is Actor, her second album, which I'm up to a 4 out of 5, though. I think this is a great album. Um, I do really enjoy this early St. Vincent sound, but as is reflected in my list, I don't necessarily go back to them as often as full albums, largely because Marry Me more so than Actor, there's a sort of lack of variety compared to her other albums, the three I have at the top. Um, and what gives Actor the edge over Marry Me, I think it's not necessarily about the tracks being way better. I think it's more about a variety sonically. You have the sort of abrasive, punky Actor Out of Work, which still kind of fits the vibe of the album somehow, despite being, completely different. There's a couple tracks like that on this one. But then you also have a sort of extension of her previous sound with the beautiful The Party is my highlight of the album. Um, that sort of orchestral, beautiful piano track, and that is kind of reminiscent of a lot of the ideas that were being played with on "Marry Me," and it just feels like it's perfected with that song, especially when you hear the orchestrated version from a recent live album, which she did in London. Which I'm going to go see her on that tour next month in Toronto. That's going to be awesome. Um, and Yeah, I think it's just the perfect album for a spring afternoon. It's really soothing and calming, but also sort of jolts you with some energy. So it's not too sort of sedate, which is how I felt Marry Me was at times towards the back half of that album. Um, it's kind of a really confident album, and it demonstrates that she is an artist worth taking seriously into the 2010s, which she proved, right, with the albums she released in that time. Um, and I think a lot of people consider this her best album. I can't get there because I just think she got better, you know? It's not that this album isn't great. It'd probably be in my top 10 of 2009, maybe top 5. Um, and I just think that she had more avenues to go down. And I think she's at her best when she is just being as crazy as possible, which is why I like Actor Out of Work so much because it does feel like, oh, this is something new for Annie. Um, So yeah, really, really nice album. The piano especially sounds beautiful on this when it does come in, and the production is just fantastic. And yeah, maybe I would say aside from those two tracks, I think a lot. It's like every track is like a four-star track for me, which is probably what drags it down a little bit. To have like two five-star tracks and the rest being really good, but not playlistable. So yeah, really, really enjoy this, and I think really it was just a sign of things to come rather than it being the height of her powers.
Hmm. Interesting. Okay. All right, my number four, and I can see this being people's number one. I've got her third album, Strange Mercy, from 2011. I don't think it's your number one based on what I've heard so far, but it'll be interesting to see. Anyway, Strange Mercy more or less continues in the same vein as its predecessor, Actor. It's got that same surreal, Baroque, Wizard of Oz atmosphere. As usual, her lyrics are open to interpretation, but on this album, a lot of them have to do with Annie processing her emotions around the imprisonment of her father for stock fraud. The title track apparently deals with this. In fact, it was the first song written for the album and served as a guide for the rest of these songs. The opening track, Chloe in the Afternoon, seems to be about a dominatrix. I love the strange synth sounds, almost like a mellotron. Next track, Cruel, is gold. I can't tell if I'm hearing guitar or keys, but they sound wonderful. Cheerleader kind of drags, but it's very good. Annie sings, I don't want to be a cheerleader no more. And at the time, it kind of made me think, okay, then don't be one. I've pretty much gotten over that attitude though, and I do like the song now. The video is actually really cool too. Surgeon is a great song. The synths really wig out at the end, and I kind of wish they kept playing a while longer. Same with the next track, Northern Lights. There's a great, weird, squiggly synth solo at the end. It sounds totally improvised. The rest of the album is strong, Hysterical Strength being the weakest track. Still good though. Like her previous album, Actor, Annie collaborated with John Congleton, who helped her immensely. Actor feels more ornate and cinematic, while Strange Mercy is a bit more minimal, sharper in focus, and perhaps more rhythmically aggressive at times. But I just don't think Strange Mercy is on the same level as Actor as far as the songs themselves go. However, it is very, very good. So I'm at 4.25 stars.
Yeah, Strange Mercy is my number three. Um, 4.5 for me. I think this is a fantastic album. I think it's a big statement album because really, if you sort of take your mind back to 2011, she's released Marry Me, a very sort of ornate, classically influenced, piano-led album. She releases Actor, still in that sort of chamber pop genre, a little bit more abrasive at times, but mostly pretty easy listening. And then Strange Mercy comes out, and I would say it's quite a left turn from where she was leaning, and it is a much angrier album. It is where that sort of Nine Inch Nails industrial influence comes in for the first time that you really hear it. And it kind of now it feels obvious that she was never just going to make like pretty chamber pop albums for her whole career, but at the time it was probably quite a cool wow, okay, this is what she's doing now. Interesting, you know. Um, there's this sort of devilishly manic energy to this sort of middle era of her career, and obviously the middle albums are my top three. So I obviously really like that, and that's what has really drawn me to her as an artist. And I feel like the production, even how good the production was as an actor, it's stepped up a notch here. Um, when something's supposed to sound devastatingly pretty, it does, and when something's supposed to sound harsh and bombastic, it does. The great example of that is Northern Lights, this sort of like rollicking rock track, which I don't think anyone could have predicted from her after listening to the last album. Even compared to Actor Out of Work, it's a step up in terms of intensity. I'm a big fan of both Cruel and Cheerleader. I think those are among the two songs I heard first from St. Vincent. So big soft spot for those. And I think it is on Cruel, it is both a guitar riff and a distorted keyboard riff, and it's sort of like beefed up by having both, I think. And that really makes it feel more powerful. And it's such a little manic, a manic little cocaine fueled riff. I don't know if that was involved in the making of this album, but I wouldn't be surprised. Let's put it that way. So it's a really entertaining album, is how I would put it. It's really great to put on. It's a lot of fun from start to finish, whilst also still having those reflective moments. And like I said, it has this sort of angry energy to it, which you do get on some of her other albums, but this is like the sort of letting it all out album. And I think that's why it's connected to so many people. I think this and Strange Mercy, this and Actor are probably her most acclaimed albums. And I think it's because they show two sides of the same coin, right? And I think as a sort of duo, I think people would say Marry Me and Actor are like the companion albums. It's quite interesting to look at Actor and Strange Mercy as companion albums because they feel like, this 2 years apart, two sides of the same coin. They sound completely different, but you can tell it's the same artist at the same time. So it does kind of hurt to have to put it at number three. But 4.5 stars, fantastic album, and it's only at number three because I like the others more.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, that is very interesting. We don't see that album quite the same, but you really justified your point of view. So no complaints from me. My number three is St. Vincent, her fourth album from 2014. This is a great album. St. Vincent gets even artier, if that's possible, and delivers a fresh array of intriguing synth and guitar sounds. And once again, it's often hard to tell the difference. That's certainly the case on the bouncy opener Rattlesnake, which starts off with some crunchy synths, but later in the song, I can't always be sure what instrument is playing. Birth in Reverse is gold, featuring some roaring instrumentation that creates the illusion of slowing down and speeding up. Next song, Prince Johnny, is one of St. Vincent's most melodically pleasing songs. I love the synthetic background vocals. The lyrics are ambiguous, which is typical for St. Vincent. Huey Newton marches along with a twirly little keyboard figure before rumbling, corrosive synths take over at the chorus. Or is that guitar? Once again, I couldn't say. I Prefer Your Love is very good, but the first song to dip below the excellent level, part of the vocal melody reminds me of Ashes to Ashes by David Bowie. It's a rather direct love song written for Annie's mother. It seems odd to me for her to sing that she prefers her mother's love to Jesus' love, which just strikes me as obvious, but it's a lovely song. Bring Me Your Loves is a wild one. Love those squiggly synths. Bring me your loves. I want to love them too. I thought you were a dog, but you made a pet out of me. Seemingly fun lyrics about polyamorous lovers. Psychopath is the weakest song here, but it passes as good. Every tear disappears, gets trippy with more squiggly synths. I think it's reasonable to interpret the song as an indictment of internet culture. Same with the intriguing Digital Witness, one of four singles, and possibly a few others. The final track is supremely melodic, just great. So, most of this album is excellent, with only a few tracks dipping below that level, and two of these songs are gold, Birth in Reverse and Prince Johnny. So, I'm giving this album 4.5 stars. It's excellent, but not quite 5 stars.
My number two, St. Vincent self-titled, 2014, fourth album, sticking at 4.5 at five. And to me, these top three were so hard to order. I feel like they're very similar in quality. For me, um, this feels like a real continuation of her steady trajectory towards being a true pop chameleon. You know, you've mentioned David Bowie a couple times. I think not necessarily sonically always, although sometimes it comes through in her songwriting and her melodies. I think in terms of career path, David Bowie was a major influence in how he was able to incorporate so many styles and make albums even so unpredictable as you never knew which way they were going to go next. Um, and I think that really comes to the forefront here. There is more of that sort of abrasive industrial influence sound that you started to see on Strange Mercy, but it is definitely less subtle on this album, especially on a track like Huey Newton, which has always been one of my favorite St. Vincent songs. That like pleasure.loving.huey.newton bit is one of my favorite vocal deliveries of her entire discography. It's so cool. And it really is just the sound of an artist truly in her element. I love the use of brass on this album. The horns are so cool. Definitely on the first half of the album, especially, it's used quite prominently on a few of those tracks. Um, Everybody loves Birth in Reverse for good reason. It is a really iconic St. Vincent song, and you know, if you would have to name her five most well-known songs, that's probably on the list. I've always had a soft spot for Digital Witness, as well. Really love that song. You mentioned Prince Johnny, might be my favorite of that trilogy. I don't know. All three of those songs are fantastic. And again, much like All Born Screaming, the album cover is perfectly resembling the style of this album. It's a bit sort of jarring, but also, you know, she is the sitting on her throne of manic pop, which is exactly what she crafts here with influence from all over the place, from industrial to classic rock to singer-songwriter to synth pop to anything you can think of. You'll hear some of it on this album. And it never, you know, whenever she puts these more abrasive sounds in her songs, they're always pop songs at their core, which I think is what I always love so much about it, is that her songs are always catchy, they're always compelling. There's never a song that is like, oh, this is just a sellout pop song. There's also never a song that's, oh, this is just like pretentious crap, you know? She's always right in the middle, which I really respect. And I think in terms of epitomizing St. Vincent, this might be the best album to go to for a first time listener. Maybe, you know, Actor or Marry Me is more accessible, but this feels like it's a microcosm for her entire career almost, which, you know, says a lot. And it's not even my number one, but I love it.
Très intéressant. Very interesting. My number two is her seventh studio album, her most recent, All Born Screaming from 2024. The first seven of these 10 tracks are all excellent. In fact, most of them are 5 star gold. Opener Hell is Near sounds so good when the full band kicks in at the end of the first verse. That bass. I love the heavenly synth outro as well. Reckless seems to be about the death of a friend. Annie herself was quoted as saying the heavy industrial outro was intended to represent the feeling of, quote, being truly unmoored by grief. There's a lot of pain on this album. It is possibly Annie's most emotionally direct album. For the first time, she produced it herself. Broken Man deals with pain. The whole song builds in a pretty amazing way. Flea is the most fun song here, very catchy and goes from relatively quiet verses to loud in the chorus. Plus, there's some fantastic musical passages in there. Big Time Nothing has a catchy beat and a supremely squelchy synth. Violent Times also has a catchy beat plus great horns. It's very seductive. The opening drums on The Power's Out recall the way Bowie's 5 Years begins. Bowie again. The quasi reggae So Many Planets is the weakest track here, but it's still very good. The final song, the title track, is nearly 7 minutes long. It's got some amazing percussion and goes off on a nice musical excursion in the middle section. Annie sounds very critical of herself in this song. Ultimately, it's an acknowledgement of the harshness of life, that to be truly alive, you're going to go through some shit. While the last three tracks aren't quite as strong as the first seven, the excellence on display here is enough to warrant a 5-star rating. Some of St. Vincent's best music is here, and she has truly evolved as a songwriter.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I think it's a harder nut to crack than some of her other albums, not because of anything to do with the sound, but she really just isn't going for as much of a pop direction on that album. And I think maybe that's why I struggle with it a bit more. I still like it, and like I said, it probably is her best album sonically,
Yeah.
in terms of the production, but I just the songs don't really stick with me much.
When it first came out, I gave it a 4. It did grow
Uh-huh.
on me.
Hmm. Okay, interesting. Maybe I need to go back to it again. But yeah, good review. My number one is Mass Seduction. I can't turn off what turns me on. Mass Seduction. It is her fifth album from 2017, still at 4.5 stars, but I don't know. My rating system might be different to other people's. A 4.5 star album for me is this album is in my top 100 albums of all time. So I don't know. For me, this is pop bombast at its very best. Um, it's a really exciting mix of genres with some really structurally complex tracks like Pills, which starts off as this like almost cynical radio jingle parody, um, which is a really biting and clever satire at the same time. And it goes off into this like slower section, which is almost reminiscent of the outro of Paranoid Android. And then getting the big saxophone solo at the end is beautiful. That track in itself is just there's so much great going on with that. You get these like really radio friendly tunes. I mean, Los Angeles is maybe her most well-known song. And I think there's a reason for that. Rich doesn't like the chorus. I see what you mean. I think the chorus might be the weakest part of the song. I actually think the verses are catchier than the chorus, but I still like the chorus. And you get touching ballads. Some I think the best ballads she's ever written in New York and Slow Disco in particular, and Happy Birthday, Johnny. Those three, just all home runs. And what I love about this album is how it can do bombastic, it can do cacophonous with tracks like Pills and like Sugar Boy, but it can also reel it in and produce a track like New York and I would say more so Happy Birthday Johnny and Slow Disco, where you really it's so simple. It almost feels like a demo, Happy Birthday Johnny, but there is a real genius to that, contrasting that with the ornate intricacy of some of the other tracks. Um, the title track is one of my favorite St. Vincent songs as well. Just so catchy, and I think probably my favorite guitar solo on any of her songs. Really like gnarly, and I love the tone on that solo as well. Again, a bit of a divisive album, much like Daddy's Home. But there is a large amount of the fans who consider this one of her best. And I feel like it's one of those where people who are into St. Vincent really like this album, and people who aren't don't like it as much because it is very St. Vincent. You know, say what you will about this album, it is very, very her, which is great for me. What stops it from being 5 stars? There's a couple tracks, which is why I shook my head when you said that earlier, Rich, on the second half of the album, which I don't like as much. I like the ballads, but I think putting all the ballads together in sequence is, yeah, I don't know. And I think Savior is probably my least favorite on the album, not counting Dancing with a Ghost, which is basically an interlude. Um, I actually think those first 5 tracks are all among her best. Hang on Me, Pills, Mass Seduction, Sugar Boy, Los Angeles. I think they're all amazing, and they were all in consideration for my top songs list. Um, yeah, always has been my favorite St. Vincent album. Always will be, unless she releases something better. Which, even though her last 2 most recent albums I had at the bottom, I still think she has a classic album in her, and I actually considered Mass Seduction to be one of the classic albums of the 2010s, in my opinion. So, love it.
All right, good stuff, Tom. Yeah, Savior is one of my least favorite on that album. Still really good. Um, so my number one is her second album, Actor. It is the highest rated on Rate Your Music by 1 point. It's just 1 point ahead of Strange Mercy. That's kind of funny. Um, so, Actor came out in 2009. I thought long and hard about giving this to All Born Screaming, but Actor is a more perfect album. It's interesting that Annie Clark took inspiration from old Disney movies because the music on Actor is very Disney-esque, very Technicolor. This is the peak of her art rock, in my opinion, so far. This is grade A Baroque pop. The Strangers begins the album sounding like fairy music, and there's that disturbing line, paint the black hole blacker, which creates a stark contrast from the twinkling music, which eventually takes off in wild ways. I adore the next song, Save Me from What I Want, with that tasty marching beat and twinkling guitars in the background. 7 of these 11 songs are gold, and another 3 land on an excellent 4.5. The last track, the sequel, is the weakest track, but it's still very good. Annie is in fine voice here. I don't completely understand her lyrics, but they're always intriguing and thought-provoking. The party is absolutely delightful from a musical standpoint, but rather devastating from a lyrical one. Just the same, but brand new, swirls like carousel music. The woodwinds, the strings, the layered background vocals all conspire to make this the most ornate St. Vincent album. The theatrical arrangements, the tension between sweetness and menace, it's utterly charming, delightful. This has to be my number one St. Vincent album. 5 stars.
Yeah, I mean that's totally valid choice. I really like that album too. I just can't quite get into it as much as everybody else seems to, but I think that's just a preference. Again, like I said, that middle era of her discography so far is where my I really get my fix.
Hmm. All right, cool. So now we're on to top 10 St. Vincent songs. And I think it's best to just list them off. If you want to comment, that's fine too. So take it away, Tom, with your top 10 St. Vincent songs.
This was pretty hard. I had a short list of about 16 or 17. which I was able to whittle down. So, number 10, I have Slow Disco from Mass Seduction. Love the strings. Great lyrics, simple but effective. Nine is Cheerleader from Strange Mercy. I love the anger in her vocals and that chorus, the way the instrumentation complements her vocals is really powerful too. Number eight, I have one of her best straight up pop tracks, Cruel, also from Strange Mercy. Um, just, that riff is amazing and great chorus made by the riff, really. Number seven, Los Angeles from Mass Seduction. Like I said, really catchy verses, good chorus, amazing bridge, uh, great production, deserves to be a hit as it has become. Number six is Marry Me from Marry Me, which, again, I've spoken about it. Love the vocal delivery, and that probably her catchiest ever song as a full song. Number five, which has just sung its praises, The Party from Actor, particularly that live version with the London Symphony Orchestra. Wowie, 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 so good. Number four is Mass Seduction. I can't turn off what turns me on from Mass Seduction. I did it again. Um, as you can see, it's a song that gets stuck in my head a lot. Awesome, awesome production, and that guitar solo just rips. Number three is Teenage Talk, a non-album single, which is really minimalist and synthy and really, really nice. There's not really, well, there is a chorus, but it kind of all goes at the same tempo and the same vocal delivery, which makes it so different to what I'm used to from St. Vincent. And I have always loved it. Love the vocal delivery, love the lyrics. Brilliant, like nostalgic for teenage years track, and so different to anything else she ever did. My number two is Huey Newton from the self-titled album. Um, Again, mentioned I really love the lyrics and that that I think it's fuzzy bass that comes in. That doom 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 doom. It's like, awesome. Such like the first time you hear that track, first time I heard it anyway, I just went absolutely nuts. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. And again, a big reason why I got into St. Vincent, this track. And my number one has to be Pills from Mass Seduction. Super catchy first part. But that first part would have probably made a good top 10 song. But that second half of the song with the slower part and the really cool guitar lead and then the sax solo, it is just ridiculous that someone thought to make this and that it is as good as it. Absolute masterpiece and one of my favorite songs of all time. So there we are.
All right, very cool list. I love it. Okay, my top 10 St. Vincent songs. Number 10, like you, I've got Cruel from Strange Mercy. Annie does some wild things on guitar, while other times I'm not sure what instrument is playing. The video is quite disturbing. A motherless family kidnaps Annie, forcing her to be the family's mom. But they aren't satisfied with her, so they bury her in the backyard. Nine, The Strangers is from Actor, amazing Disney-esque song. And this idea of painting the black hole blacker is thought-provoking to say the least. Eight, Violent Times from All Born Screaming, a very cool track that sounds like it would make a great James Bond theme song. Annie has acknowledged as much, although she didn't write the song with James Bond in mind. Seven is Big Time Nothing from All Born Screaming, definitely one of the coolest sounding St. Vincent songs. Number six, I've got Laughing with a Mouthful of Blood from Actor. It's about a young person living in a motel in Los Angeles, writing to his people back home that everything is going great when that's not really the case. Number five, I've got Young Love from Mass Seduction, just a powerful and moving song about being powerless to do anything about a friend's severe addiction. Number four, I've got Prince Johnny from St. Vincent. I love the synthetic background choir and the ambiguous lyrics. Number three, I've got Flea, All Born Screaming. And along with number two, Hell is Near from All Born Screaming, these two songs represent Annie at her current peak. Just incredibly well written, well played tunes. But my number one has to be Save Me From What I Want from Actor. This one is just a monster. That march just invades my thoughts. So good. All right, Tom.
Yeah, that was great. I had a couple tracks I wanted to just mention that didn't quite make my
Sure.
top 10 list quickly. Birth in Reverse and Digital Witness from the self-titled album for sure, and Actor Out of Work from Actor would have been the closest cuts, I think.
All right. Cool. All right. Well, do you have any final thoughts about St. Vincent before we sign off?
Listen to St. Vincent if you haven't already. It's been great to revisit all these albums, some of which I hadn't heard in full in like 7 years. So it's been really, really fun, and I look forward to seeing her in concert next month. That's going to be awesome.
Sweet. I'm jealous, Tom. All right. Well, I don't really have much to add to that. She's just a phenomenal talent, and I'm looking forward to what she does next. All right. So thank you for joining me today, Tom. It's been a
Thank you.
blast. It always is. Peace out, y'all. Have a good one.